God is my engineer. How would you like to begin, sir?
Happy music? I could do happy music.
Happy music it is. Play on, Macduff.
Are you actually asking me to sing here?
No, I am not.
That's a smart move. I don't think he celebrates really much of anything.
Really?
Yeah.
He doesn't have like special little barbarian sort of traditional festivities that he partakes in, like, caber tossing or.
Once again, you're getting barbarians confused with Scotsmen.
Oh,
which fair enough, but no, I mean, apart from the normal barbarian festivities of every day on the battlefield, every night in the alehouse or the whorehouse.
Okay, all right. Scheduled quaffing.
Yeah, I believe you're getting barbarians confused with. I don't even know how to end that one. You're that far off base.
All right, whatever.
What is something that is known for being well quaffed?
Beer. Dwarves.
Oh, quaff, not quaff.
No, quaff. Quaff.
Oh, okay. I thought Coif.
Not coif.
That's not coif, that's quaff. To be well coiffed is to be well groomed. It is to have a nice haircut. Speaking of which,
yes.
French word for breastplate.
I know how it's spelled.
Yeah, me too. But I have never mastered the
Cuira.
I have tried pronouncing it every way. I have even looked up the pronunciation,
right,
and none of it sounds right. Like, it's supposed to be either cuirass or cuirass. I don't like either of them.
Right. The source of all knowledge, Wikipedia.
I'm sorry, I had something crazy in my ear. What did you just say?
The source of all knowledge, Wikipedia.
How do I hang up this call?
I don't know. Just go with it for now.
Okay, fine. The source of all knowledge, Wikipedia.
Yes. Has a pronunciation thing.
Yeah.
Which, if you mouse over it, will tell you syllable by syllable how to pronounce things. And apparently, it is K as in kind, W as in wind, I as in kit, R as in rye, AE is the A in bad, and S as in sigh. Now, I don't know why they chose those particular words.
That you cannot put that together into a pronunciation.
Cuirass.
Wait, you're pronouncing your I is in kit.
No, excuse me. Okay, all right. Yeah.
It should be cuirass.
Cuirass, yeah, cuirass.
If you go by that pronunciation.
Yes, cuirass.
Cuirass.
Gosh.
Cuirass.
Now, wait a minute here. I don't think you can say that.
A is in bad. Cuirass.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all right.
Cuirass. Sure. Cuirass. That's what. Yeah, no. Wikipedia is wrong. I have found several pronunciations of that word. That's none of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so much for the source of all knowledge. Yeah, no, I mean, go ahead, put it in a script, see what I do with it. You wanted to say something about Numenera 2.
I didn't want to. I feel that maybe I have to. But
okay.
Well, what a scam. Okay, I mean we were this is still more on our trip to Gen Con, really, because that's where we first heard about it. And honestly, I haven't even looked at the Kickstarter because of course it's being kickstarted, because that's how Monte Cook sells things, pre-order our upcoming product on our pre-order page, kickstarter.com. But what I've heard of it so far, I can't even make sense of like, okay. All right. So They are kickstarting Numenera 2.
So I have heard.
Right. And here's this, like, the descriptions have been sort of all over the map. The one thing that has been made abundantly clear. Oh, and the Kickstarter actually supposedly went live this morning.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Do you want me to tell you numbers?
Yeah, no. What is it? Already backed?
Oh, yes.
Already backed. What? Three times the goal already. Whatever the goal is. So I'm guessing the goal is what, 100,000, and it's probably at 300,000 right now.
No. The goal is 80,000. Strangely enough,
I was pretty close, man.
250,000 almost.
So 250,000.
Yep.
So 3 times 80,000.
Yep.
Yeah. Do I get credit for that at all? You're not
you
even remotely impressed.
You can have credit for being in the right range,
Okay.
although not being on the right numbers.
Okay. Okay. And this is the thing, because Numenera 2 is yet another, how can we get people to pay for Numenera again?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because that's how companies, specifically Monte Cook, is now selling games. Right? And now I'm afraid to speak because I don't know if maybe I should read this whole Kickstarter page, and maybe we'll get more details than what we heard at Gen Con and in the one little announcement on the Numenera page. But the one thing is that Numenera 2 is Numenera 2 because it's being sold in 2 books.
Right.
Because, of course.
Numenera Discovery and Numenera Destiny.
Right, okay.
Each of which is a 416-page book.
Yeah.
Hardcover. The same size as the existing Numenera core book. Yay. Oh, and if you buy them together, they come in a slipcase.
$60 gets you one of those 2 books.
Right.
But if you want to get both of them, then it's going to cost you, $120. Really?
That's what it says.
Sorry, really? You don't get a discount for buying both?
Nope.
Suckers. I mean, that's what. Why give them a discount? Because they're not going to, they won't care. They'll pay anyway.
Now, I'm unfamiliar with the general practice here in terms of Kickstarter, but generally speaking, when a product hits Kickstarter, all right, and people start kicking it or whatever,
yes,
do they not get a discount off the cover price just because they help back it?
That it depends entirely on the project and the company running the Kickstarter.
Okay.
There's no, you don't have to. You can set the price at whatever you want. And honestly, because Kickstarter has really become a pre-order system for a company like Okay, so this is the thing. There is no doubt Monte Cook is going to deliver Numenera 2.
Correct.
None.
Safe bet.
This is not uncertain. This is not a project that even needs kickstarting. Because Monty has the money to just fund a printing. We know this. So there is no doubt. So at that point, it's not like, you're taking on this risk, and so to compensate you for the risk, we're going to give you a discount. There's no risk involved. You give them the money, you're going to get the books, and you're going to get them pretty much when they say, which is a year from now, June 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So for a company like Monte Cook, there is literally no advantage in giving you any sort of a discount, and you do not need any sort of a discount because you're just pre-ordering a product and you know it. He's not going to fail to deliver. Your money's not at risk. You're going to get the book a year from now, and it's going to be more Numenera 2. The same thing, only the same thing, which may be an entry point, which is a compilation of all the material. Okay, because we got off topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this was the thing. And I really don't feel like reading all of this now because I couldn't care less. Or I could care less, whichever one is the correct one. Don't email me, I don't actually care. So we heard at Gen Con that they were announcing Numenera 2.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Numenera 2, when you hear the title Numenera 2, that sounds like the second edition, right?
It does.
The sequel, more, more Numenera, but our response to that was, wow, really? Numenera 2 already? But then, to be fair, it was 5 years ago, right? I mean, Numenera has been around for 5 years now. So I guess, yeah, fine, it's a short edition cycle, but there could have been a new edition cycle. So Numenera 2, you think sequel, right? Okay. But then we hear they want to make it the entry point product. They want to make it the evergreen product because there has been so much now done for Numenera that they need Numenera Essentials. They need that thing that people can buy to just easily get into the game, because I guess the core rulebook isn't enough for that. And they don't want to do like a beginner box. So it's just, Numenera 2. This is the way to get into Numenera, which is exactly how you signal to a new player. This is where you start, is with a 2 in the title. Then we hear that they're going to, in this sequel that isn't a sequel, because they're not doing a new edition of Numenera, it's still the same rules. In this sequel that isn't a sequel, that is an entry point that is not an entry point, what they are really doing is compiling all of the stuff, all of the stuff that has already come out, all the world building and stuff that is all over the place, and they're going to compile that. So in this book that is named Numenera 2, that is a sequel that is not a sequel, that is an evergreen product entry point, that is a compilation of everything that they've had. But now it looks like it's also 2 books, one of which is a revised book. Numenera Discovery it's a revised original Numenera core book. So not enough changes to make it a new edition. Don't worry, your old edition is still good, but it's a revised core book. So it's the book you already have, basically.
Have we just rebooted the series with J.J. Abrams directing?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's still friggin' Shatner directed. Was Shatner a director?
Yeah, he did
Lucas
one or two.
Lucas. It's still Lucas. Yeah, he did the one we don't talk about.
Right.
Yeah. So Leonard Nimoy, he got to direct the one with the whales, huh? And everybody loved that. I bet I could do a better one. Mine's gonna be about Shatner meeting God. Yeah. Okay. It'll be awesome. Everybody will love that. Take that, Nimoy. I'm sorry. So now, and then the second book, Discovery. I'll try to read through this here. Discovery is the book that is a revision of the core rule book, that is the evergreen entry point, that compiles all the basic stuff. And Destiny will enable you to truly become a part of the setting to help shape the future of the Ninth World. Yada, yada, yada. It's basically it looks like it's a combination of setting book and kickstarting a big story, a big plot arc. And then it says that what this is really about is helping foster a community and its people. Helping and fostering a community and its people, making the Ninth World a better, safer place for its inhabitants. Oh, I can't even tell whether they're talking about players or characters now, because they're talking about all this community building and making it better for their player base, and then it's like all over the place. I have no clue. As with so many things from Monte Cook, I have no idea what this is actually going to be.
Well, you're still better off than paying, what was it, $250 for a box of unknowns?
Oh, yeah, right. Loot Crate, the RPG.
Right.
Sure. What was that, Invisible Sun?
Yeah, something like that.
This is the thing. What kills me is, and I feel bad saying this, because to put this in context, I have nothing against Monte Cook. He's actually a good game designer.
Yeah.
I feel that D&D 3.5 or D&D 3.0 really did in a lot of ways revolutionize Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm.
It put everything on this sort of universal thing, and Monte Cook was a big part of that push.
Right.
You know, and he was a big player in 3rd edition. And I like Monte Cook. I've played The Strange,
Yeah.
which is Numenera that isn't Numenera.
Right.
And I like that. The mechanics are okay. It does some neat mechanical things. I have nothing against Monte Cook. I just think that at this point, he's sort of trying to become the Scrooge McDuck of role-playing gaming. Because I can't see this as anything other than how can we get people to pay for Numenera again?
I guess my next question then is, what do you think? Next year after for The Strange 2?
Maybe. I don't know. Did The Strange have the community that Numenera does?
I don't know.
The Strange has Bruce Cordell all over it. Okay, Bruce Cordell is a really, really interesting guy because he has this really cool background in physics and science. I don't know what his actual background is. I don't think he has a degree or anything, but he has a really, really keen interest in physics, especially astrophysics and quantum physics and all the weird fringe physics.
Uh-huh.
And he loves playing around with them in games. Like he did for Alternity, for the original Alternity. He was behind Tangents, the extra dimensional travel one. And there's this whole, so it was basically this was Alternity is a sci-fi role-playing game. And Tangents was a book about traveling between parallel universes, a la that show Sliders, where you travel to different Earths where this is the Earth where the Egyptian Empire never fell and it gradually took over the whole world and all of that stuff, and this is the Earth where the dinosaurs never went extinct and all, right? So the entire first chapter of Tangents is actually a discussion of hyperspace and the Einstein-Rosen bridge and how the theory of relativity and quantum wave theory both predict the existence of hyperspace. Those are literal headings in this book. And it's fantastic because at that point he's not even talking about game mechanics. He's just he's writing an essay on how, on physics and world building there. And The Strange is more of the same. The Strange is heavily based on this really bizarre notion from physics that dark energy, which is this mysterious force that is causing the universe to accelerate in its expansion, despite all physical laws saying it shouldn't happen, that dark energy may actually be the gravitational attraction between this universe and other universes. And this is actual physics in the real world here. You have scientists talking in these terms, there's other universes and we're being pulled toward them, and that's what's causing our universe to expand faster. And he took that concept and took Numenera and then ran with it. I love that stuff, but you have to have a certain tolerance for a certain level of high-level physics discussion to enjoy it. This is the new pattern for role-playing games. You release your game, then you take the same game and do it in a different universe or setting or something. Then you release your core system as the Cypher system or the your whatever system.
Mm-hmm.
Then you start it all again with something new. That's the pattern with Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars, right? So we did, here's Star Wars again, here's Star Wars again. Okay, we got as many settings out of this as we could. Now it's time to, file the serial numbers off and release the generic engine with no universe attached.
Right.
Right?
Sure. That's certainly one way to look at
it. I'm sorry. I know you have a special point.
Well, I do. It's true.
I know.
But I also know that the thinking, since you brought it up, the thinking between the three different versions of the Star Wars rules from Fantasy Flight was that there are actually three different types of players within the Star Wars roleplay universe. And they felt they were catering to those. So, whatever. As far as Genesis goes, which is the generic system.
Wait. Scoundrels, Rebels, and Jedi?
Scoundrels, soldiers, and Jedi, yes.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. More or less. I mean,
okay,
roughly.
You know what? I'm glad you said that, because I actually have a little bit more respect for Fantasy Flight Games now, if that's true.
That is how it was explained to me, and how it has been explained to everybody who's ever asked.
Right. But is that the actual conversation that happened in marketing?
I think it was.
Is my question. Or was it, do we really think that we can get, enough years of mileage out of these products to justify what we had to pay for the Star Wars license?
Well, I'm gonna begin this reply to your question, sir.
Okay.
By saying that at least one problem they corrected by doing it this way was the problem in all previous editions of the Star Wars RPG, no matter what company they came from, which was that Jedi swiftly became ridiculously overpowered, and it was pointless to run any other character because they never really had anything to do. So, by releasing in 3 parts, they were able to say, okay, here's your first bit, here's your second bit, and now we're going to pay real careful attention to how those get used before we decide to let you in on the Jedi, and we're going to balance them. And so that's why technically there's no Jedi in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They are Force sensitive or Force users, not Jedi. But
right, which is also why technically in the first 3 movies there were no Jedi, as we saw the Jedi in the prequels, because at some point Lucas decided that instead of being these antiquated knights holding on to this tradition while the universe kept advancing around them, so that they were basically, knights of the Crusades trying to fight in the Napoleonic Wars, he decided they should be immortal superpowered space wizards instead.
Right.
Yeah.
Go with that.
Right.
But yeah, but it I think it's a solution. I'm not saying it's necessarily the best solution, but it's certainly a solution to those who are more than familiar with the fact that the Jedi quickly become overpowered, and B, are maybe not interested in playing Jedi, or not interested in playing soldiers, or not interested in playing scoundrels and fringers, and thereby giving them a system that caters to what they do want to do.
Right, and it makes sense, because you can't possibly build a system like that, even in the prequel movies. Remember how many times Han Solo was complaining to Chewie that the Luke Skywalker kid was just not letting them get anything done, because he was just taking care of everything, and he was stealing all their XP.
Right, I remember that specifically.
That was like the best scene of Empire.
It was,
and that's why they went their separate ways. And it's like, let Luke go wander around the swamp planet. We'll go handle things. And then, of course, the GM had expected them to bring the Jedi, so when Darth Vader showed up on Bespin,
Cloud City,
Bespin. Cloud City. That was Bespin, right?
Yes, it was.
When Darth Vader showed up on Bespin, the party didn't bring their wizard.
Having said all that, Fantasy Flight did do something interesting, and they announced it at Gen Con.
Oh, okay.
They reprinted, sir, the West End Games D6 Star Wars role-playing game.
Yes, I heard about this as well.
Yeah. It's curious. I'm not sure what motivated it, but they're back and available. They're limited edition. I guess it's kind of the 30th anniversary, but
well, I think they probably realized that there was a 4th Star Wars player that they weren't capturing in the previous 3.
True.
Which is batshit insane people who hate good rules.
Right.
This is just a little bit too playable.
Yeah. But, I mean...
Plus, what's with all the dice? Could we just maybe use one type of die?
There you
go. The dice I get in Monopoly. Is that good enough? I'm sorry.
I mean, fair's fair. Okay. For a lot of the post 4, 5, and 6 time, between that and the prequels.
Yeah.
West End Games Star Wars was pretty much what kept the franchise alive for a number of years.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I make jokes, obviously, but no, I am aware, and honestly, I played the West End Games Star Wars 1, and at the time, I was perfectly happy with it. Then I saw how games could actually be designed.
Right.
But
a lot of the stuff we know about Star Wars, and quote unquote know about Star Wars, came from that role playing game and its supplements.
Right.
So there is a point to reprinting that for its 30th anniversary. Whether that really makes sense for Fantasy Flight to have done that, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, certainly from a legal standpoint, they probably can't let anyone else do it.
No, this is true. This is true.
And if there's money to be made at selling it, it's gonna be them. I mean, whatever we may say about Fantasy Flight's having this smart idea about providing games for the 3 different types of Star Wars players, Fantasy Flight Games is going to make money.
Yes.
That is, and I don't say that even as an insult. They're very good at making money off games. And to be fair, they design a good product. Their board game rule books are sometimes a little unevenly edited, but they design a good product.
The thing is, they also know when to stop publishing something. Unless that something is Twilight Imperium, in which case they would just continue to print that. But
I gotta imagine someone's buying it.
Yeah, well, they announced a new version at Gen Con.
Yeah.
The 4th edition, which is, as I recall, quite impressive in size. Let me see here. It might be just size of wallet required. Twilight Imperium, 4th edition, $150.
Are they, just so that I'm clear, because I don't really follow it so much, are we talking about them redoing the board game or them doing the RPG?
The board game.
Okay.
Yeah, 4th edition of the board game.
Because there was a Twilight Edition RPG, Twilight Imperium RPG, wasn't there?
There was.
Or am I crazy?
There was. It was a number of years ago. And the problem with it was, as I recall, was that Christian Peterson, the guy who runs Fantasy Flight Games and created Twilight Imperium, did not oversee that project. And so many things came up out of that RPG that were not good, to put it roughly. But anyway, so it never got reprinted, and I don't even think you can find a copy of it now anymore, really. But because that was like the Star Wars Holiday Special of Fantasy Flight Games. They bought those back as quickly as they could.
The Wookiee porn rules were really really out of place in that book too.
Yeah. But anyway, Fantasy Flight's doing the 30th anniversary Star Wars West End Games version, and I guess it's all right. I mean, it's not any more or less expensive than their current line of Star Wars stuff. But I just wonder how much they're going to support it too.
Probably not at all. I mean, to me, this looks just like a collector's item.
Yeah.
And when you read, there was one line because you read the announcement to me either at Gen Con or while we were on our way to Gen Con, I can't remember. And there was a line in there that it was something like just as playable as it was in its original form. Yes,
exactly. I love that line.
Right?
we call that the left-handed compliment.
What do you mean elf is a class?
Yeah. It's a job.
That's bad. Well, see, this is the thing. Okay. Classes. When did class become synonymous with job?
I don't know. It's just what they do.
I mean...
He's a cleric. Is that a job or a class?
Fine, but he's an elf. Is that a job or a class?
I know.
There you go.
Elves and dwarves, as I recall.
I mean, well, originally the whole point of the whole point of classes is just it's an archetype. It's not really a job, or like, is fighter a job?
Sure, if you pay him to fight.
Well, but then he's a mercenary,
Oh, right.
or a soldier, or a gladiator, or a guard, or a thug.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he's freelance, he could be a mugger.
Doggone
Yeah,
freelance fighters.
But fighter, we don't look at fighter and say, oh, well, that's someone's job. Fighter is this broad range of people who have been trained in combat as part of their jobs. That's kind of like saying, being in the army and being a beat cop and being a security guard, that's all the same job. It's an archetype.
Yeah. I don't know. Frankly, I do, but I don't understand why we have the classes, and I'm doing air finger quotes here, that we.
Yeah, well, I could hear you pronounce them actually.
That we have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they seem. What's the word I'm looking for? Arbitrary?
They are. They are very well. If you want to go back to the beginning of time here, by which I mean 1974, you had 3 classes. You had the fighter, the cleric, and the wizard, whatever they were called, fighting man and cleric and wizard. And those are, there's very clear divisions there. The guy who hits things, the guy who casts magic, and the guy who is the priest. Fine. And then they added the rogue, right, as that sort of 4th archetype. And I've always kind of felt that rogue and fighter actually have a lot of overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, nowadays, if you ask people, if you're only going to have 3 classes, what are you going to have? And invariably people say fighter, wizard, rogue. And then when you say, well, what about cleric? And they say cleric is basically wizard. But the Dragon Age RPG and then the Fantasy Age game did the same thing, where it was fighter, wizard, rogue. Whereas I cannot help but feel that fighter and rogue are basically the same character class. They are the people who live purely by their training and equipment. Okay? They have a slightly different skill set, but I could much more easily create a set of rules that encompassed both the fighter and the rogue than I could. Rogue, you could have assassin and scout and ranger and all of these other things as subclasses of people who know how to fight. Mm-hmm. At least nowadays. Whereas you could, if you were smart, you would actually build some strong divisions between cleric and wizard, which,
Well, I mean, I understand the point that cleric is basically wizard, because anymore, a cleric is just a set of spells and then the occasional prayer to a god.
Well, honestly though, it's more like, if you consider one end of the spectrum to be fighter and the other end of the spectrum to be wizards, clerics are the middle of the road. Right? Clerics usually have decent martial training.
They've got AC, if nothing else.
They've got armor. They've got a selection of weapons that they can use, and their spells supplement their combat power. So, I can kind of accept that the fighter is the pure expert and the wizard is the pure magic and the cleric is somewhere in between. That's
excellent.
Also a fine division.
So then we can do away with things like sorcerer and witch and whatever other magic using class you particularly want to name.
Well, I mean, it depends on what you want to do.
Spellslinger.
Okay, so I actually have a theory about this. Okay. And it actually explains everything that I hate about the D&D class system. Even though again, disclaimer, I love D&D. Okay.
Okay, all right.
There's 2 options for class. If you're going to write a class-based RPG, there's basically 2 options. On the one hand, you have a very small list of very broad generic classes, and then allow the players, as they're generating their characters, to specialize that character. Okay, and a perfect example of that, especially in 5th edition, is the fighter class. Okay, because that fighter class now, if you look at all of the different martial talents that a fighter can get, They can become the big, heavy bruiser with the two-handed weapon and everything and the bonus damage and yada, yada, yada. Or they can become the defensive protector, knight, tank type character. Or they can actually become like the combat leader and yell orders and give people extra actions to do stuff like that. That's all rolled into the 5th edition fighter. So the fighter is a broad class that covers a whole bunch of different archetypes, and then players gradually specialize in that. And that's fine. That is one way of doing classes. Another way of doing classes is to build classes that have very specific roles that align with their roles in the world. So for example, the warlock in D&D is not just a mage, not just a wizard. It is someone who has entered into a pact with a supernatural entity and has gotten a unique pile of magic that no other spellcaster can use for the most part, that comes from the fact that they have entered into this pact. But that pact is also part of the character. If you are an Infernal Pact warlock, it's not just, I chose to be a spellcaster and specialized in these spells. It also says something about the character. That you thought you could get one over on the devil in exchange for power, that you did the Faustian bargain thing. Right? And that's another way of building classes. You can build highly specific classes that represent particular archetypes in the world you want to build. Okay? What you can't do is put both of them in the same game. Because then it looks weird. It looks weird on the one hand to have these highly specific characters. Like there are very nuanced differences between sorcerer, wizard, and warlock. But then you get to fighter and rogue. And there's these paragraphs at the beginning of fighter and rogue that explain all of the different things that fighter and rogue could represent. And that they're these very broad, very unspecialized things. Wizards is another one. Interestingly enough, wizards are highly unspecialized because they specialize based on their spell selection, right? I can decide to be the fire wizard, or I can decide to be the wizard that has the Batman tool utility belt that has the solution for every problem, or, I'm the wizard who only deals with summoning. You can do all of that, but there is also this world role built into wizard that says, and you did it all by learning the algebra of magic.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is, though, that when you start to look at this stuff, it was originally, the classes were very generic. And there wasn't even really a way to specialize except by what you did. And then gradually specialization got added into the game. But at the same time, as people started coming up with more and more specific, neat things that could fit into the world, they started building classes for them. And a lot of the things that are classes today started as subclasses. The Ranger was a subclass of fighter. I believe so was the Paladin.
Right. Seems like it.
Right. Druids were originally clerics. In 2nd edition, the Druid, even though it was listed as a separate character class, the text specifically called it out as an example to the GM of what it would look like if you decided to make specific clerics for specific gods. It was like, okay, here's the cleric, and then also, here's an example of what they called a cleric of a specific mythos. And that was the Druid. The Druid class was an example to the GM of, here's how you build specific clerics.
Yeah, I remember that, because that wasn't even, like you were saying, it's not even really a character class. It was just an example of things.
Yeah.
I remember reading that, and I don't think I had anyone who wanted to play that, so I never really got to see it happen. But I mean, because everybody went, oh, he's okay. He likes to be out in the forest, and that's all we care about. So
right. Well, but then that's, what is a druid?
Yeah.
What is a druid that is different from a cleric?
We were far too into actually being inside caverns.
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying a druid wouldn't have worked inside a cavern. I'm just saying that in our thinking at that time, he seemed pretty pointless.
Well,
for what we were doing.
In the Angry Verse,
Yes.
You know,
Hello.
druids and rangers are the clerics and paladins of the natural world.
Right.
Okay, so a ranger fills the same role as a paladin, except instead of worshiping the gods, they worship the natural forces of the world, and clerics, druids and clerics the same. And the thing is, then they can enter into the same plots as clerics and paladins do, except instead of, your god demands you do this because this thing is evil, it's your god demands you, or the spirits of nature want you to do this because this is an abomination against the world. You can still hate your undead, you can still hate your elementals, you can still hate demons and devils because they are the intrusions of, you know, divine entities into the natural world. So, it doesn't have to be that complicated. But still, you know, where people really get hung up is when I try to explain to them, no, the ranger is basically the equivalent of a paladin. They're the guardians of the natural. Well, they're the guardians of civilization. Actually, they just live outside of it. They live on the fringes. But then that's me going into the whole Lord of the Rings ranger.
Sure. We should do an episode about that on GM Word of the Week one of these days.
We should totally do that.
Yeah.
Maybe like a couple of weeks ago we should do that.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago we should have done that.
Yeah.
Tell our future selves to go back in time and do it.
Yeah. Anywho, but no, to get back to the whatever we were calling the point. Yeah, the classes in D&D are totally arbitrary, and the classes in other role-playing games are now totally arbitrary because every other fantasy role-playing game is in some way taking something from D&D, even when it's trying purposely to not be D&D.
Give me an example, sir.
Sure, Dungeon World.
Okay.
Dungeon World is very clear that it is not D&D. It is the narrative, story gamey alternative to D&D. And yet, if you open that up, it's got all of the same archetypes. And they pretty much fill the same roles as in D&D. It's like even you could take this over to video games. Like go play World of Warcraft. All of those are D&D classes. Even though the Warcraft universe wasn't D&D. I mean, it was a little bit, but
Yeah. I feel like science fiction RPGs are way better at this than fantasy RPGs.
Yeah, that is like that's what I wonder about, because so you play Mass Effect, right? And I don't recommend it. But you play Mass Effect. I mean, it was very well done in terms of role playing and exploring a universe. Not so well done in terms of gameplay. But there was a hell of a lot of world building that went into Mass Effect, and I'm not talking about the Andromeda abomination.
Right.
Okay, I'm talking Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3. Okay. There was a whole hell of a lot of world building, and there were very interesting species that all had these intricate histories that fed into their mechanics. There was, it was a really well detailed world. And then you go play any other, I'm trying to think of another sci-fi game with really good world building, and I know there are others, and it's just escaping me right now.
Right.
But
sure.
But then you flip on every fantasy, adventure, and role-playing game ever, and it's all the same. It's all just elves and dwarves. Is this what fantasy has become? I thought fantasy was about, imagining whole new amazing worlds and things in them, and every fantasy is the same. Fantasy no longer means fantastic. It means this particular setting invented by J.R.R. Tolkien. Except in this one case where our universe is different.
There's a lot of medieval with dwarves.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're not wrong. There are, I believe, and I'm sure somebody will email us at our email address and correct me, but I believe there are a couple of fantasy RPGs that don't do that. But I'm going to be really hard pressed to name them because I've never played them.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are they any good?
I want to say one of them might be Exalted, but I could be terribly, terribly wrong about that.
Exalted?
Yeah.
Isn't Isn't Exalted the transhumanity thing?
See?
Oh no
See?
no no no
See?
no. Okay, you're.
I'm going to look now because I've said it and now I have to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm looking it up too. That's White Wolf. White Wolf's role playing game.
Yeah, White Wolf, blah, blah, blah. High fantasy, it says.
High fantasy.
A mixture of world mythologies as well as Japanese anime.
Oh well, sure.
Tales from the Flat Earth, Hawkmoon, the Gods of Pagana, Ninja Scroll, the Black Company, Resurrection Man, the Night Watch, and Galveston, the Odyssey, and Journey to the West.
Well, that's everything.
Are
That's
its
been inspired by
influences.
Journey to the West. If it's
Yeah. I know.
That basically means we took a 100 level course in Chinese mythology.
Right. I've never, like I said, I've never played it, so I don't know what classes and things it uses. And I'm sure somebody, as I said, will email us and let us know.
And be very angry at us for not knowing anything about it.
Oh, actually, okay. So the source of all knowledge has provided.
If you're gonna keep calling it that, you're gonna be doing this alone.
The champions of okay, so the default protagonists of Exalted are the champions of the Chief of the Gods, a being known as the Unconquered Sun. There are 5 castes of Solar Exalted. Dawn, which is warriors and generals. Zenith, priest kings of the Unconquered Sun. Twilight, the scholars and sorcerers. Night, the spies and assassins. And Eclipse, the ambassadors, diplomats, and negotiators.
Okay.
So it's a little different.
Yeah, actually though, geez, I hate to say that, but that's actually kind of a, like, in terms of the idea of having broad and more general classes, I think that really kind of hits everything that I would want.
Well, there you go.
That's actually not bad. I gotta write this down.
Yeah.
Though
Exalted.
now what's very interesting is if you look at the Abyssal Exalted, they break down along the same lines but slightly different. You know, they still have they cover the same 5 roles.
Right. And then you got Lunar Exalted and Sidereal, Terrestrial. Okay. All right, I'm not going to turn this into the Exalted show.
It does make me a little bit curious about Exalted. I'll give it that.
Why, sir?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about the RPG with the world's worst layout?
I thought it would be funny. There's actually 2 very specific stories I have about 13th Age and why.
I will take story number 1.
Okay. So story number 1. We have talked about 13th Age individually with our friends and together. And right. I enjoy 13th Age, the game, okay. It's neat for what it did, for what it was. Rob Hainso and Jonathan TWiT, by the way, after they left Wizards of the Coast, they felt that 4th edition had not gone far enough, and they wanted to Pathfinder 4th edition, and 13th Age was what they did. And it does some neat things. You can definitely see the influence of 4th edition D&D in here. But this book is an abomination in terms of layout and design and stuff. And there is one very specific example. When people say, explain, what did they do wrong, in 13th Age? I am always a little bit torn because, as we've observed, there were 3 different people who wrote 13th Age, and nobody edited their stuff together, so it sounded like there's one voice. There are times when the text argues with itself. Like, we could give page reference. If I look it up, I can give you a page reference for when 2 of the different authors of the game are having an argument in the text of the game.
Yep.
But that's not what kills me. That's not my go-to example. There is a table in 13th Age, in the core rulebook, for building encounters. Okay, and it's the table of, when your adventurers are this level, this is how many monsters and mooks and yada yada yada, because it has robust encounter building tools, or so it claims, right?
Right.
There is a missing piece of data from the table. Okay, because at first level, or I think it's like at first to third level, things work a little differently. And they could not figure out how to lay out the table properly to do this. And they literally call it out in the text and they say, just remember, if this is first level, that's only how it works at these levels. We didn't want to mess up the table, so just remember that the table's a little different here. Remember this one exception. And that says it all right there. It's like, we couldn't figure out how to format our table to include the information on the table, and rather than solve that problem, we tried to make the table look good. And I should say, failed also. So that is my one story. And when I saw that, because I got my copy of 13th Age, I actually ran 13th Age the year it came out at Gen Con for Pelgrane. And I got my copy, and I was happy, and I'm home, and I'm reading it, and oh hey, I'm in the Kickstarter credits for this one too.
Huh.
Yeah. See, I don't hate everything. This is proof. 2 games in a row we talked about that I actually funded. Okay. Anyway, I got it home. I'm reading through it, and I'm kind of like gradually have this sinking feeling as I'm looking through this book, and I'm like, this is not, like, it's very hard to find stuff. I mean, I'm not lying when I say the formatting is something you could do in Microsoft Word, like with a default template. There's nothing called out. There's nothing segregated out. There's not even really any sidebars. There's no visual separation between one chunk of rules and the next, other than like heading 2, heading 3. You know what? I take it back. This isn't even Microsoft Word. You could do this in HTML. And I don't even mean like, with a cascading style sheet or PHP or whatever your kids are doing nowadays on your websites. Just straight up HTML, you could lay out this book. It's terrible.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember if this was the one or if it was a different one that we have not discussed yet that actually was laid out with, what is it, XHTML or something like that? Whatever.
Was
anyway.
It really?
I
would believe it. I was just going to throw out the second story. Is I met, I think it was Hainso, at that same Gen Con where I had just finished running his game. Yeah, it's Hainso because he autographed my book. I met Hainso at Gen Con, and I complimented, because when you first pick up the book, if you just look at the cover, and inside the cover there's a really nice world map and stuff, and you look you look at the first couple of pages and you're like, oh, this is actually pretty good looking. So I was just leafing through the book as I looked at it, and I said, wow, this is a really nice looking book. And he starts going, we were so proud of the layout and the organization of this book. Because, when we set out to make this book, we realized that we couldn't just present this game as a textbook like role-playing games do. You have to engage the readers. You have to draw them in. So we want to do that separate style. And there was this one innovation that we're really proud of, and that is that the index and the glossary are the same thing. And sure enough, if you look, you go to the back of the book, and you look up something like, I want to look up dexterity, and there is a page reference listed and a definition for dexterity. It is a glossary and index in one, which makes it far longer than it needs to be, and it's also very difficult to find the page numbers. Because it also looks like they used, how in Microsoft Word, when you hit that justify button, you don't want to do right or left or center, you hit justify, right, so it stretches it out and puts the hard lines on. And every once in a while, for reasons known only to the octopus that lives in Word's brain, it'll decide to, even though you're at the end of the paragraph and it doesn't have to stretch the line to the end, it'll do that anyway. So you end up with 2 or 3 words on a line stretched out across the whole line. It looks like they did that in the index, as near as I can tell.
I agree with everything you've said about 13th Age so far.
Okay.
All right. And in addition to that, I want to complain about whatever the heck it is that passes for their monster manual.
The bestiary?
Yes.
Well,
there is, as I recall, virtually no actual artwork of any of the monsters in there. They are all Boy Scout achievement badges.
They are. Well, you are being a bit disingenuous, sir. Because, sir,
yes,
that was not their monster manual that decided on that formatting.
Oh, was it? Is it in there?
That was actually the core rule book.
That's the core book, yeah. Okay.
They literally, like, when they have a key to the monster entries where they explain how they're laid out in the stats, and they literally refer to it as the monster tile art.
Yeah.
The little, you know, as you're calling them, Boy Scout achievement badges, so that every time you kill one, you can slap it on your backpack, which is,
yep.
you know, so, and then clearly they had a format that worked, so why change it? Why fix what ain't broken?
Right. That was just like so disappointing because, I mean, they have the pretty standard stuff in there. You kind of have a general idea in your head about what it looks like.
Yeah,
part of
it's Dungeons and Dragons, only by way of 13th Age.
But by the same token, part of what helps define the world that you're going to be playing in and adventuring in is the look of the creatures and whatnot that you're going to be going up against. Right? A dragon's a dragon, pretty much. But I feel like a 13th Age dragon is going to look a lot different than a D&D Forgotten Realms dragon.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Or, you know, yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean.
And it's part of it. You want people into that world, so why is there no art?
Well, and that's the thing, because the monster manual, or your monster book, or your monster stats, whatever you're going to call them, that is the one thing that that GMs are going to hold up to their players. You know, it's the players may never see the player's handbook because the GM is going to help them make the character, and they're not going to read through the whole thing. So they may never see the art other than the cover art. But that GM is holding up the pictures from the monster manual. I do it. I'm sure every GM does it.
Yes.
That's the one place where if you have a style to your world, that's where you can show it off. Like you look at the art of Shadow of the Demon Lord, and you look at the core rulebook, they only have pictures of some of their monsters to save page space. But there is a style to all of these monsters. There is sort of this diseased, corrupted, twisted style to everything that just, it perfectly sets the tone of the world. So when I say, you guys are attacked by this beast man, and then I hold up the picture of this, half hidden in shadows, monstrosity that is tearing the throat out of someone, it looks like, oh yeah, he is. Covered in blood and slavering and barely seen. That says something very different than the picture of like a werewolf in the monster manual.
Right. Anyway, I'm just adding that complaint to your list, your litany of complaints. I'm going to ask you to pretend that Dungeons and Dragons does not exist. Okay. But we still had a role-playing revolution, and we still had all the things that came from it.
Okay.
All right? It was just some other game that wasn't Dungeons and Dragons that managed to make that happen.
Okay.
What are your top 5 alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons? You're being forced to pick. You can't just say there isn't any.
Yeah, you know what? And I can't even argue about this because I recently did the same sort of question and yelled at people who tried to avoid the question. So we're presuming that all of the role-playing games except Dungeons and Dragons exist, and I need a new
Right.
replacement fantasy game.
Sure.
And I'm even gonna say Pathfinder would be a cop out, right?
Probably would, yeah, because there wouldn't be anything to base it on.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, half the role playing game library is based on Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, yes, but not quite as directly.
Okay. All right. So number one, would definitely be Savage Worlds. And if if I can use supplementary material, I would specifically run the Hellfrost setting of Savage Worlds,
Okay.
which is absolutely fantastic. I guess number two. Do these all have to be fantasy?
Well, that would be the niche that Dungeons and Dragons would have abandoned.
I guess, but to be fair, once I had, if I had one, I don't need 5 alternatives.
Well, true, but do it anyway. Humor me.
All right. I am partial to Fantasy Age.
Okay.
So if I had to, I would play that one. I would also do Dungeon World. I like Dungeon World. Part of me wants to answer Tunnels and Trolls, but I just can't say it. I can't. Let's see. So I would do Warhammer Fantasy Role Playing.
Oh, would you? That's interesting.
Now, see, but here's the thing. There's sort of a little problem with me saying that because I have only played the Fantasy Flight version of Warhammer Fan. That was my introduction to the Warhammer Fantasy universe, and they canceled that.
Yep.
Which, though, interestingly enough, that was where they invented the dice mechanic that found a home in Star Wars.
Right.
It was and I still have those books, and I have the dice. So theoretically, Warhammer Fantasy roleplay. But I would go back and try previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy. It's a neat enough universe.
Sure. Somebody just picked it up again too, I think.
Did they
if I
really?
recall correctly.
I
I think so,
out.
but I can't remember who it was.
What am I up to now? Is that 4 or 5?
You're at 4.
Oh, then you know what? I would actually throw Dungeon World on there.
You already threw it in.
Did I already throw it in?
You already threw it in.
Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Shadow of the Demon Lord.
Yeah, I mean it's more spellpunk or steampunk. Not
Right.
really. It's more of a, you know what? If you're allowing Warhammer Fantasy, then it's no different in terms of technology. It's got guns basically. That's the difference.
Fair enough. Now,
all right.
Here's where this gets fun.
Wait. Are you not going to answer?
No.
Okay. Fine.
Here's where this gets fun. Would you like to hear Paste Magazine's 5 tabletop RPG alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons?
You know what? Can I? All right. I know this is going to sound funny. I got to change one of my answers though.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
I would not run Dungeon World for any extended period of time. But you know what I would run for an extended period of time, probably happily? 13th Age. I actually, the game is good. It's a fun game in there. Eventually, I'd get good at reading the rules. So now, I'm sorry, what was this that you're hitting me with now? Because you don't want to answer?
Paste Magazine's top 5 tabletop RPG alternatives to Dungeons and Dragons.
Wait a minute.
And having changed your answer, you've made this list slightly less interesting, but that's okay.
Okay. All right.
Number 1.
So you're not giving your answers. You're just reading off the answers from some magazine.
My answer is Hackmaster.
Who the hell is Paste Magazine? And that's one.
Yeah, my answer is Hackmaster. My other answer is probably something. Oh, what do I want? I want like a meaty mechanic, but lots of story behind it. All right, so we'll put Paste Magazine to one side for a second, and I will try to give you a list of 5. All right?
Fair enough.
Jesus Christ.
Fair is fair.
Hackmaster. Numero uno.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
All right.
Though if you get a few people into a game of Hackmaster, you may change that answer.
Yeah, I might.
It's a really nice game until you have to run it.
Right.
I'm sorry. I like it though. I'm sorry.
See, the thing I run up against for these, do top 5. Well, I've only really played 2 or 3 at best,
Okay.
and didn't necessarily like all those. Yeah, I guess Savage Worlds would be a potential one, just because I've had some experience with it, and it seems good enough to play continuously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just based on what we've read today, I might be convinced to try Exalted.
I am curious about that now, I'll admit it. Maybe I'll
Let's
just
do
get a
2 more.
copy and run it. You want me to run an
Maybe.
Exalted game online?
I don't know. It's up to you.
Would you play?
I might. It depends. Is it going to be good?
Everything I run is good.
See,
I'm going to run it in Fantasy Grounds. You'll love that.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Let's not talk about that right now.
Okay, I'm sorry. You're still coming up with... So 3 left.
Because I still have 2 left.
2 left? Okay. 2 left.
Hackmaster, Savage Worlds, Exalted.
Okay.
I can't come up with 2 more. I can't really think of anything that would be in that place for me.
I'll let you off the hook.
Point being, that's my list. I'm going to leave my list right there. I don't think my list is nearly as interesting as yours. And it certainly isn't anywhere as near as interesting as Paste Magazine's top 5 replacements for D&D.
Wait, are you saying that they are more interesting than me?
No, I'm saying they were more interesting than my list.
Oh, okay. That's fair.
Thanks.
If there's anything more interesting than me, I want it off this show.
Dungeon World is number 1.
Yeah. All right. You had to know that was going to be on there.
Okay. 13th Age is number 2.
Okay.
See what I mean about your list suddenly becoming slightly less interesting with that change?
Yeah, well, sort of a limited sample size, though.
Right. Number 3, you'll love number 3. It's Burning Wheel.
You're wrong. I do not love number 3.
No, I'm sure you do. I'm sure I specifically remember you saying how much you loved Burning Wheel.
No, actually, see, this is the thing is I have never actually played Burning Wheel. I have played the fantasy specific game that was based on it, Torchbearer. I ran that torturous abomination for 3 months.
Didn't like Torchbearer, huh?
Oh my god. You know what? And come to think of it, I kickstarted that one too.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and I was very excited about it because someone told me it was basically going to be Dungeons & Dragons by way of Shadowgate, and I was all over that crap, and it was a lie.
Nice. You have strong feelings about Torchbearer then.
Torchbearer. Oh, never again.
Number 4 on their list is Beyond the Wall and Other Adventures, which I have never in my life heard of.
No? What is it? Does it give a description in this?
It's okay, I'll read you what it says. Build as a 0 prep RPG. Beyond the Wall is designed to let you play through a fantasy adventure in a single evening. It uses some of the rules elements of early editions of D&D, but is extremely easy to get into for novice role players and focuses on the simple narrative of a group of childhood friends setting off on their first adventure.
If we can include now, it's an OSR game.
Yeah, okay. There you go.
Okay. You know what? No. If I can't pick Pathfinder, they can't pick OSR.
Okay. Fair enough.
Mm-hmm. Nope. Disqualified.
Okay, disqualified. Number 5. You want to guess what number 5 is?
Fantasy Age, probably.
Torchbearer.
Are you kidding me? Torchbearer is a very excellent simulation of what it is like to play Torchbearer. Okay, I don't know how to explain it quite like this. The rules were so, abstract is not the word I'm looking for. I guess abstract, fine. The rules were so abstract, you could play out a conflict, whatever the conflict was, or an encounter. It doesn't even have to be a combat, without once referencing what is going on at the table, in the story.
Right.
Like, I mean, I know you're not supposed to do that, and I know that technically you could do that in D&D too. You could just say, I do an attack roll and do 8 hit points. Except that you would have some sense from just saying, I make an attack roll and I do this many hit points of slashing damage. You would start to have some sense of what is going on in that scene just from, I'm making an attack roll and I do slashing damage. Oh, clearly I'm using a slashing weapon of some kind to hurt something. Whereas in Torchbearer, the stuff is so far removed from that. You know, people were because you had, like, the team had to divide itself up, like, and one person each round was the leader of the group, and they would assign a role to each character. Like, you're going to take our first action, and then you're going to take the second action. I'm going to take the third action, and then the players would pick types of broad classes of things they want to do. Like, one player would decide, okay, I'm going to take an aggressive action, and then another one would be, I'm going to take a defensive action, and the third one would be like, oh, I better, you know, take this different type of action. And then the actions would be compared to the 3 different actions that the GM chose for whatever the opposition was, be it a combat or whatever. And then there was this sort of rock, paper, scissors thing to figure out who had the advantage in each instance, and then dice were rolled, and then other people could give them dice, but only in certain situations, and yada yada yada. And then, like, you played out these conflicts, and at no point was it, so what's actually, you know, like, I'm just gonna run up and hit a monster. And I'm not even exaggerating it. And as I understand it, that is the Burning Wheel engine. Torchbearer was so bad, it made me hate all other games based on the game it was based on by association. Like, I'm a little curious about Mouse Guard, but you know what? To hell with it. I don't need Torchbearer and the Rats of Nim. Okay, like, I just, oh my god, that was the worst 3 months of my entire gaming life. And I'm not alone. My 3 players, whose names I am withholding,
right,
were all there with me.
Dun, dun, dun.
And we're looking at the end, we're like, the only thing, we just ran a 3-month simulation of playing the game that we were playing. At no point did we ever get anywhere near a story. And the other thing is that Torchbearer is basically designed to be a screw job. There's sort of a trick to it where if the players take no actions, nothing can hurt them. Every time the players take an action, it starts an issue. And then that inevitably leads to one or more of the players being inflicted with a condition, like being hungry or being scared or being angry or being sick. And it is very hard to die in the game, but what happens is you just end up weighed down with all of these conditions. So all of the characters are hungry and sick and scared and angry and tired. It's like, this is like, what if adventuring wasn't fun? Let's make a game about that.
Wow.
But that was the trick to it that they never glommed onto, was like, if you're walking down a hallway, you can walk from one end of the hallway to the other, no problem, unless one of the players is stupid enough to say, I search for traps. As soon as a player says that, it tricks off a conflict, and then actions are taken and resources are wasted, and everybody comes away angry and scared. Yeah.
That sounds no fun.
It was not. And you know what? This is the thing. This should have been the warning sign, because it told us right at the beginning that it was not designed to be fun. It literally said, this is a simulation of how much adventuring would suck. Like, oh, well, you got that right. It really did. You know, and then you get back to, God forbid you get back to town, because then you're also broke and run out of town and living on the streets. It was horrible in every sense of the word. It is not a game you play for fun. It is a game you play. It is like the Catholicism of role-playing games. It is the game you play because you have some unresolved guilt that you need to work through. Okay? That is a sentence. That is not a game you play. That is a punishment. Anywho, so I humbly disagree with some of the entries on their list.
Oh, good. Humbly, even.
And I don't know anything about Beyond the Wall, but it sounds cute.
Does yeah, it sounds cute. Yeah.
Except zero prep is bullshit.
Would you say Grimm's fairy tales would count as fantasy?
Sure.
Okay, then my fifth one would be Grimm.
I have no experience with Grimm.
It is pretty much just as I just described. It's by Fantasy Flight, or put out by Fantasy Flight.
Mm-hmm.
It uses an entirely different system. The premise is that you are in Grimm's fairy tales. You're a child who has become, for one reason or another, taken into the Grimm's fairy tale world. And we're talking old school Grimm's fairy tales.
So you weren't getting out alive?
Probably not.
Okay.
So it's, I had a lot of fun running that for some people for a live play that I recorded.
That seems cute.
Yeah, no, it's pretty, I ran it pretty light, but it can get nasty in a hurry.
Oh yeah, the original Grimm's fairy tales were horrific.
Oh yes.
And
yes,
you know, not even the Grimm stuff, but all of the fairy tales were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to depress yourself at some point, look up the original Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Sea Maid that inspired The Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
That's a depressing story.
It's right up there with realizing that in the original, or at least some of the very early versions of Cinderella, the ugly stepsisters attempt to fit their feet into the shoes by cutting off bits of their feet.
Yeah, and in Snow White, wasn't the evil stepmother punished by being bound into burning iron shoes that forced her to dance for the rest of her life because they were burning hot?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah. And then wasn't Sleeping... Well, I guess we shouldn't get into Sleeping Beauty.
No.
Most people don't realize it. She had a kid before she woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't the prince what woke her up. It was the kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. Think about the ways that could happen, you know?
and let us not discuss the true meaning of Rumpelstiltskin. It's not that hard to work out. Anyway, yes. So Grimm would be my fifth one. I was going to ask you another thing, but guess what?
What would that be?
We're out of time.